Welcome, everybody. Sven Hosford with the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society. Another podcast today with our Executive Director, Patrick Nightingale. How are you doing today, Patrick?
I'm absolutely fantastic, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to join this podcast.
Oh, that's great. Well, we should tell everybody that Patrick is practicing, as they call it, criminal defense attorney here in Pittsburgh. And he is the former director of the Pittsburgh chapter of NORML, and he is now our executive director. And we're going to talk a little bit about your transition from NORML and to medical cannabis and why that's such an important transition. So let's talk about your achievements with NORML. The recreational, it's about the reform of marijuana laws. And so to that extent, in the city of Pittsburgh, you've achieved that goal.
Well, I would at least like to start out from, the very beginning of what got me involved with NORML here in Pittsburgh, and that was the introduction of a medical cannabis bill by Representative Mark Cohen back in 2009. That kind of galvanized my interest, galvanized my activism. And, I'll be, completely honest with you. I thought that I was, signing on to ride this wave into, medical cannabis legislation, many years ago. It surprised me, or it shouldn't have surprised me, that here we are, a number of years later, 6 years later, still having the exact same discussion about whether or not Pennsylvania is ready for medical cannabis. But in that respect, what got me involved with NORML was, quite literally the pendency of medical cannabis legislation here in Pittsburgh. So, all throughout my advocacy as the director of the local chapter for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, I have, and we have had at our back, we have medical marijuana legislation that we're trying to pass here in Pennsylvania against all odds. So it's almost quite natural that I moved from my advocacy on behalf of NORML to joining the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society, which is going to start to work to bring this into fruition.
And describe some of what you'll do actually with us, with the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society.
Well, first and foremost, I think that I bring a patient's voice. I bring the voice of the cannabis consumer. All too often, when we see some of these medical cannabis programs being unrolled in states, the voice of the patient is lost. And I think that one of the most important things that we have to consider is that the success and the failure of a medical cannabis program here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania rises and falls on patient participation. We can have the best medical cannabis program in the world, in our opinion, but if patients do not take advantage of that, if they don't sign up for it, if they don't participate in it, then it will be a failure. And we have seen the risk in other states that have overregulated or severely restricted their medicinal cannabis program, that patients simply aren't going to participate. Mm-hmm. So it does no good whatsoever for individuals to spend potentially millions of dollars to obtain a license and to set up a medicinal cannabis processing facility, growing facility, distribution facility, if patients do not come and take advantage of that. And that's what I think is a critical role and a critical voice that must be consistent throughout this process as we move into hopefully having a bill to be signed and the regulatory phase.
Now, we interviewed a couple of Philadelphia attorneys here in a podcast recently. They're going to be, they are our vendor partners, Justin Morricone and Ted Flowers. They were of the opinion that compared to other states, what's been put together in Senate Bill 3, if it passes reasonably close to that, what's in there right now, that it's pretty solid legislation, that this could be a very good, firm foundation for a sustainable industry here in Pennsylvania. As an attorney, is that basically your assessment?
Absolutely. I think that Senate Bill 3 has given us a framework that, if it is not unnecessarily or unrealistically watered down by the House, can really put us in a position to have a very effective and efficient medical cannabis program that benefits patients. The legislation is the first step, however. Once this bill gets passed, it now goes into the regulatory phase. Regulations need to be developed about how to apply for licenses, how licenses will be awarded, and then, obviously, how this program will move forward. And that's where I think that we have a critical role to play, and that I, as the advocate on behalf of cannabis consumers, can come in there and say, no, if you pass this, it does not benefit the patient. This is something that will benefit the patient. And, that type of, I think, real world cannabis industry and medical cannabis industry experience is critical for our Pennsylvania patients. Because the one thing I do not want to see is, for example, our medical cannabis dispensaries providing medical cannabis products that are more expensive than what is offered on the black market.
Right.
That's a failure. No cannabis consumer is going to spend more money in a regulated cannabis market than they would in the black market. So, first and foremost, we need to understand that and to work forward towards regulations that makes quality cannabis, medicinal cannabis products available to patients at a price that they can afford.
Well said. That being our goal, with a good, solid product available at an affordable price, it really, our job as the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society is to work with all the aspects of the industry. So that is the patients, as you said, but also the medical doctors, as well as the business and legal interests in the industry. Talk a little bit about the medical side of things, how important it is to educate doctors, and tell us, we just recently put out a response to the Pennsylvania Medical Society about their position. Talk a little bit about that, the importance of educating doctors and so forth.
It honestly comes back around to this idea of patient participation. If physicians are not recommending medical cannabis to their patients, then their patients are not going to participate in a medical cannabis distribution program. So it is critical that we reach out to physicians, because there is no one out there, teaching them or training them about medical cannabis, at least not here in Pennsylvania, because it remains a Schedule I controlled substance. But we know from 24 other states, and from all of the experience of our colleagues in medicinal states, that there are physicians who support this and who believe that it has tremendous medical efficacy. Our job, our critical role, is to engage with patients and then reach out to their medical professionals and say, your patient, anonymously, obviously there are HIPAA concerns, but we believe that patients in your practice could benefit from medicinal cannabis, and we would like to open a dialogue. We absolutely are willing to embrace the role of reaching out to help to educate Pennsylvania medical professionals, to give them the resources, access to the resources that they need, so that if they were going to consider recommending medicinal cannabis, they can do so with the reasonable assurance that what they're doing is in the best interest of their patients. And that's something that is going to be an uphill battle. Doctors are obviously trained in the empirical method. They're trained to rely on what has been scientifically proven. And there's a bit of a gray area there with cannabis. And that's where we need to come in and to be able to share the type of anecdotal evidence, the journal publications, the clinical studies conducted here in the United States and in other parts of the world, and to give them the type of access to their colleagues in medicinal states who have embraced this type of a non-toxic treatment alternative. Literally, I don't want to say we're here to train doctors. I'm a lawyer. I am not going to train a medical professional about anything. But we hope to share with our medical professionals here in Pennsylvania as much information as possible so that they feel that they can confidently and competently recommend medicinal cannabis products to their patients.
And the Medical Society put out a letter recently where they asked the FDA to reschedule marijuana to help with the research, which is a good step in the right direction. But there were some inaccuracies and some of the furthering of very common myths. Tell us a little bit about our response to the Pennsylvania Medical Society.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, the Pennsylvania Medical Society was concerned about physicians prescribing medical marijuana. A physician who is holding a DEA license to prescribe controlled substances cannot obviously prescribe something that is a Schedule I controlled substance. What they do is they make recommendations. This may seem like a matter of semantics, but if you are a physician and you hear someone saying, you can't prescribe this because you will lose your DEA license, then in fact you will be hostile to the possibility of being asked to do something that can strip you of your ability to prescribe medication. If that physician, however, is told this is a recommendation and it does not jeopardize your DEA certification, other physicians in medical marijuana states make these recommendations and still retain their ability to prescribe controlled substances pursuant to their DEA license. That's something that I think is critically important. I do not know whether this was merely a mistake or a misstatement on the part of the Pennsylvania Medical Society, but it's a critical distinction for doctors who are addressing the issue about whether or not they can consider discussing this with a patient. It was vitally important for us to set the record straight on that. If a Pennsylvania physician is asked by their patient to discuss medical cannabis, they will not be prescribing it, but they may very well recommend it as a treatment alternative.
Mm-hmm. Is it legal for patients to talk with their doctors now before it's legal in Pennsylvania? Can they at least talk about it? Is that legal?
The patient can bring it up. The physician, however, may very well feel that they cannot possibly discuss it. Okay. Anecdotally, what I have heard is that physicians will say, if you are in a different state, then you could have a more direct and reasonable conversation with your treatment provider. But I am here in Pennsylvania and I am restricted in what I can possibly discuss with you, though I have heard it could possibly be of benefit.
Yeah, okay. Well, and another thing that we like to point out is that, when there is some hesitation among doctors for the reasons of worried about doing harm to their patients, there really should be some understanding in physicians that where states, as you pointed out before, in states where medical cannabis has been legalized, opioid overdose deaths go down by an average of 25%. So in fact, doctors kill fewer of their patients. That's a really important fact. How many doctors do you think actually know that?
I don't think anybody knows that. That's one of those statistics that resonates extremely well in the cannabis advocacy community. We can seize on that and say, look, we can prove that medical marijuana saves lives. But it's very difficult to get that message out to the greater population. That's the type of message that, is, for lack of a better term, oh, that's exactly what you wanted to hear, so we're not going to pay any more attention to it. People are unwilling to get inside of the research to show that it is, very, very defensible and legitimate research. I personally think that it is one of the most important studies that has come out in support of medical cannabis and its potential efficacy. How can you deny? How can you turn your back to the fact that potentially 3 out of 10 Pennsylvanians would not die if they had a medical cannabis alternative. Now, I think it's critical. I think it's important. It's something that I have made a point of sharing with as many people as I can, including judges here in Pittsburgh who sit and deal with cases of severe heroin addiction and drug abuse. Yeah. I think it's critical. I think it's a study that we must continue to share as much as possible. And I think that it demonstrates that not only is cannabis a reasonable alternative, but it literally, quite literally, saves lives.
Oh, absolutely. As far as those kinds of facts, the advocacy community is also fond of the fact that, as far as we know, in the history of mankind, no one ever has died of an overdose of marijuana. As our friend Cyril Wecht likes to say, he's done tens of thousands of autopsies and studied tens of thousands more and never seen a death from toxic cannabinol, or what is it, acute toxic cannabinoid toxicity.
Acute cannabinoid toxicity.
I know, get it. So what other kinds of facts like that can we tell doctors and point to studies and to assure them that whether or not you're worried about the efficacy, it's safe. Nobody's going to die.
First and foremost, we have to start with that premise that no one has ever died from this. And it's, relatively speaking, impossible to die from this. Doctors want to do no harm. They want to help their patients. Doctors are concerned that something that is unknown could potentially hurt their patients. So let's start, and the starting point is, at the very least, no matter what your patient does, they cannot possibly die from this, right, which is different than if you are recommending over-the-counter Tylenol, over-the-counter Advil, or relatively benign prescription medications such as benzodiazepines or antihistamines. The bottom line is we all understand and acknowledge that certain medications, if abused, have very serious toxic side effects. Mm-hmm. This medication, however, if abused, cannot result in the lethal side effect that so many other medications have. So let's start with that and talk to our doctors and say, no matter what happens, doc, your patient's not going to die. But look at the prescription medications that they're on right now, and there are a wide variety of side effects that include risk of death, depression, suicidal ideations, whatever the case may be. Start from there, and then move forward where we can, look at clinical studies from other states, anecdotal evidence from other states, and just common sense to say that the sky is not going to fall. Yeah. We are not going to see a medical or a healthcare crisis if people start using medical cannabis. Why can we say that? Look at any number of other states that have embraced medical cannabis. And not a single one of those states have seen any type of medical crises, issues, or emergencies that has resulted from the availability of medical cannabis for their patients.
Do we know any statistics about alcohol consumption going down as well when it becomes legal recreationally?
Alcohol consumption going down in recreational states, I don't necessarily want to speculate on that. I think that it's important that recreational users have a non-toxic treatment alternative. Mm-hmm. I am intrigued by statistics from Colorado that shows that recreational cannabis is earning more in tax revenue than alcohol does. But I think it's far too early to speculate about what the availability of legal recreational cannabis will have on alcohol consumption. Yeah. We can sit here and talk about cannabis as a more reasonable or less harmful alternative to alcohol consumption, but this country and in the entire world, when you think about it, has a very long-standing commitment to alcohol as something for religious purposes, for recreational purposes. We are not going to, waltz in and say, "Hey, we're better than booze." But to the extent that recreational cannabis can provide a reasonable recreational alternative, I think that we will continue to see statistics that show that it is a reasonable alternative. I don't think we're going to see an increase in criminality merely because recreational cannabis is available.
Yeah. Well, we're getting into the spring here, and we're going to be announcing a series of events where people can come together. Again, our society is about the patients, connecting with doctors, connecting with business interests, connecting with legal interests. What are the important conversations that should be happening right now with those people, to whom and about what?
I think that one of the most important conversations that we need to continue to have is that a medical cannabis program that does not benefit patients is destined to fail. So why are we doing this? We are doing this to benefit Pennsylvania patients because we believe that medical cannabis is a reasonable, if not preferable, alternative for medical treatment for a wide variety of conditions. Where we will fail is if patients do not take advantage of this program. Patients will not take advantage of this program if the list of qualifying conditions is too restrictive. They will not participate in this program if the variety of cannabis products available is too restrictive or too highly regulated. And they will not participate in this program if the cost of medicinal cannabis products is too high. So our goal, our obligation is to address each of those concerns. We need to make sure that our medical cannabis program embraces as many Pennsylvania patients as possible, that it gives them as many medicinal cannabis products as can be available, and that it's at a price point that they can actually afford. And when I say that, we cannot, absolutely cannot, peg the price of medicinal cannabis products to the black market street price of cannabis. We know in New Jersey they're selling $500 ounces of medicinal cannabis. We can get those ounces cheaper on the black market here in Pittsburgh. So why would anyone participate in a medicinal cannabis program if they are facing higher costs than what they could have in the black market? One of the many issues that we need to address, but we have seen it go wrong. We have seen overregulation kill potential cannabis marketplaces. We do not think that benefits Pennsylvania cannabis consumers. We do not think that that benefits anyone who is interested in investing in this marketplace. We do not think that that benefits anyone who wants to participate in this marketplace.
Well, Patrick Nightingale, Executive Director for the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society, thanks for being with us today.